So TPUSA just had their event in Phoenix last night, and someone asked a question about Israel sinking the USS Liberty. If you've never heard of that, or you're not familiar with what I'm referencing right now, take a minute and do a quick Google search and look that up. But of course, Ben Shapiro, immediately labeled that individual, or implied that that individual was a Hitler-lite or an anti-Semite. And this is how Tucker responded to that.
To question your motives, actually, why can't you answer the question? Why can't you answer that question? Why do you have to imply that some college kid is like some kind of Hitlerite or something because he's asking about an event? Like, what? By the way, it is okay to ask questions.
All right, so let's pause it right there. That reaction tells you everything that you need to know about the state of conservative media leadership right now. It's not about disagreements between factions. It's about, fundamentally who gets to define the truth and who gets discredited for asking a hard question. Ben Shapiro, wants to discredit somebody if he asks the wrong question, and Tucker is, doing the right thing in this instance and actually defending that. Let's keep going.
And I thought that was like the whole reason we were against the left. They're not going to force you to get up there and make ritual denunciations because this isn't my religion, it's politics. By the way, your politics do not trump my love for other people. I remember my brother once said...
So that moment wasn't just about one question. It was about, accountability fundamentally. And it's who is willing to stand by straightforward questions without resorting to attacks or, dismissal. Ben Shapiro has built his entire career off of being precise, precise arguments, facts before your feelings. That's been his whole brand since 2016. But it's only the facts that he wants you to talk about or he wants you to hear, not the other ones, not the ones that are difficult or controversial or challenging. Anyways, here's another clip of Tucker addressing the topic of anti-whitism. Let's play that clip.
So anti-Semitism is not just naughty, it's immoral. And it is precisely as immoral as hating any other group. And that would include other groups in the United States that are hated and have been under attack for decades. And that would include white men who did nothing to become white men. They were born that way.
All right, so Carlson isn't, talking about hatred in a vacuum. He's critiquing the narratives that get emphasized and the ones that get ignored. Whatever your views are on Tucker as a person, you have to admit, there's not a lot of people that are going up on a public stage and saying the things that he is. Because it's risky. It's risky, it's hard, it's controversial. They end your career over it. When a political movement or a media narrative has the power to elevate some grievances and bury others, you're at the point where society's moral priorities are being reshaped in real time. Fundamentally, like that is a real thing that is happening. Where there is a certain faction, a certain elitist group that would like us to ignore certain realities, certain truths. And by doing so, unknowingly, that is reshaping, our morality, our moral direction in Western culture. And we cannot let that happen. Power decides culture. I mean, that is real. That is real. And the question that everyone should be asking is, are we comfortable living in a world where only some forms of frustration or hardship are treated as real while others are totally ignored and dismissed? Like, no, I don't want to live in that world. I want to be able to talk about all the things that are actually happening. You know, it's about demanding that honest conversations be had that don't shrink away from hard truths just because they're inconvenient or they make the elite look bad. If we can't discuss, you know, messy, uncomfortable topics openly, then we've ceded public discourse entirely. We've ceded, you know, public discourse to suppression. And that's what the left did. I mean, that's a leftist tactic. I mean, that's what we were fighting against for years, where the left were openly shutting down people they disagreed with, people they didn't want to hear, opinions they didn't want to hear. They were suppressing, you know, public discourse. They were ceding public discourse to suppression, and it is becoming ever more apparent that the right is falling into a similar trap. And we have to prevent that at all costs from happening. I mean, that is the worst case scenario. That's how movements lose credibility. They lose credibility not just in the court of public opinion, but in the hearts and the minds of all of us.